I want to expose the African National Congress, the Communist Party, and the South African government for what they are.
The name Lucas Mangope is surrounded by a lot of controversy, with people perceiving him as an idol of some sort. And on the other hand, some South Africans felt or even still feel that he was a traitor who sold the struggle for independence for just an unreal or an altered state of what he perceived as power. So who exactly is this man? And was he exactly a hero or an enemy to change, fooled by an apartheid system into believing that he was given power? Stay tuned as we discuss this topic and try to understand the man behind Batswana homeland. Lucas Manyane Mangope was born on the 27th December 1923 at Motswedi near Zeerust in the Western Transvaal. He was born into a royal family. He was educated at mission schools and later at St. Peter's College in Johannesburg, one of the most prestigious institutions for black South Africans at the time. Trained as a teacher, Mangope taught Afrikaans and worked in education during the 1950s. His entry into formal authority came through traditional leadership. After his father's death in 1959, he became chief of the Bahurutsibo Munyani people. If I am butchering that clan name pronunciation, please do forgive me. So, this position placed him at the intersection of customary leadership and apartheid's policy of indirect rule, which increasingly relied on compliant traditional leaders to administer African populations. During the 1960s, the apartheid government expanded its policy of separate development. This was a systemic plan by the South African state to reorganize the country along rigid racial and ethnic lines in order to maintain white political dominance while claiming that black South Africans were being granted self-rule. At its core, separate development was the idea that different racial and ethnic groups should develop separately, each in its own territory, rather than share political power in a single united South Africa. For white South Africans, this meant full citizenship, control of the economy, and political authority across the country. For black South Africans, it meant being assigned to one of several ethnically defined homelands, also called Bantustans, based on language or tribal identity such as Tswana, Zulu, Xhosa, or Venda. The expansion of this policy into homelands involved the creation and formalization of these territories beginning in the 1950s and accelerating in the 1960s and 70s. Through laws such as the Bantu Authorities Act 1951 and the Promotion of Bantu Self-Governance Act in 1959, apartheid state established tribal, regional, and territorial authorities controlled by selected traditional leaders. These structures were designed to prepare the homelands for self-government and, in some cases, eventual independence. In reality, this process transferred administrative responsibilities to black leaders while Pretoria retained real economic, military, and political control. A crucial element of this expansion was the removal of black South African citizenship. Once a person was assigned to a homeland, they were legally classified as citizens of that territory rather than South Africa, even if they had lived all their lives in cities like Johannesburg or Cape Town. This allowed for apartheid government to claim that South Africa was no longer a majority black country and therefore did not need to extend national voting rights to black people. Economically, the homelands functioned as labor reservoirs for white-controlled industries. People were forced to live in underdeveloped territories while working as migrants in white South Africa, with their families remaining in the homelands. The expansion of the separate development thus entrenched poverty, overcrowding, underdevelopment in black areas while sustaining cheap labor for mines, farms, and factories. Politically, the homeland system aimed to divide black resistance by encouraging ethnic nationalism and elevating cooperative leaders by promoting Tswana, Zulu, or Xhosa nations instead of a unified black South African identity. This is what many observing historians call the divide and conquer method. Through this, the apartheid state weakened collective opposition. In essence, the expansion of separate development into homeland was not about genuine autonomy or equality. It was a strategic reconstruction of racial domination, designed to preserve white minority rule, deny South African political rights, and shift the burden of governance into fragmented, impoverished territories while maintaining control from the center. With this government decision, Mangope moved steadily into homeland politics. In 1961, he became vice chairman of the Tswana Territorial Authority, an administrative body created by Pretoria to prepare Tswana areas for self-government. By 1968, he was chairman of this authority, giving him considerable influence over homeland administration. In 1972, he was appointed Chief Minister of Bophuthatswana, a fragmented territory carved out for Tswana-speaking people. His rise was closely tied to the apartheid state, which viewed him as a reliable partner who supported homeland system and opposed African National Congress and other liberation movements. Among many Batswana people, Lucas Mangope is remembered not primarily as a collaborator, but a protector of the Tswana identity and a builder of institutions. This was at a time when black leadership options were extremely constrained. For supporters, his acceptance of homeland leadership is interpreted less as betrayal and more as a pragmatic strategy. They argued that apartheid left traditional leaders with a narrow choice between outright exclusion or limited power within the system. Mangope is seen as someone who chose to use the space available to him to secure material improvements, administrative control, and a sense of dignity for Tswana people. A major reason some Batswana idolized Mangope was his emphasis on Tswana nationalism and self-rule. He framed Bophuthatswana not simply as an apartheid construct, but as a modern Tswana nation rooted in traditional authority and cultural pride, for people whose language, customs, and leadership structures had long been marginalized. This message resonated strongly. Mangope presented himself as a chief president who defended Tswana interests against both white domination and absorption into broader black political movements that some feared would overlook minority ethnic identities. This helped him cultivate loyalty, especially among traditional leaders, rural communities, and civil servants. Now, some people, past and presently, credit Mangope with creating a relatively functional homeland economy, especially when comparing to other Bantustans. Bophuthatswana benefited from significant revenue streams, most notably from Sun City Casino and Resort Complex, which generated jobs, tourism, income, and foreign currency at a time when many black areas faced extreme poverty. Mining, factoring, and agricultural projects, though unevenly distributed, provided employment opportunities that attracted workers from other parts of South Africa. For many Batswana families, this meant access to wages, housing, and basic services that were otherwise scarce for most South Africans living under apartheid. To make this a bit personal and take a little detour, I interviewed my 79-year-old grandmother who is quite fond of Mangope's governance and has lived in Bophuthatswana, Garangua to be exact. As per her perspective, it was a haven of some sort. When talking to her, I realized that she was reminiscing of the days when he was in power in the state. She gave credit to the availability of jobs through the presence of firms where locals were employed in large numbers and got to enjoy some economic freedom. It is, however, worth noting that most of these big firms in Bophuthatswana regions were mainly white-owned, which hints that Mangope was in close ties with the government and was able to sustain the black employment through white investment structures. My grandmother also spoke of the business opportunities that Batswana people got to experience and enjoy under no interference from foreign national-owned business competitors. This separatist government to her was best functional and profiting to the local. In her own words, these were the good old days. Batswana people got to participate in their food production industries, and that the current-day Somali-owned shops have overridden a functional black establishment, which was the state of Bophuthatswana. Well, I tried to be as neutral as possible, but to a certain extent, she was right. I mean, the spaza shop industry for one currently generates billions of rands nationwide, which is money circulated out of country by people of foreign descent. Do note that this is not a call to boycott foreign-owned establishments, but simply an acknowledgement that black people have left loose on a very lucrative money-generating opportunity. We are seeing a decline in the participation of production and retail market of foods and products we consume every day. But that was just a food for thought. You can drop your rebuttal statement on this. I'm always open for conversation on this channel. And while at it, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Well, now let's get back to our broader analysis of the Bophuthatswana government. Under Mangope's rule, Bophuthatswana developed administrative capacity and infrastructure that supporters point to as tangible achievements. Schools, hospitals, roads were established, and a relatively professional civil service emerged. Unlike some homelands that existed largely on paper, Bophuthatswana had functioning institutions that delivered education, healthcare, and social services to many residents. For ordinary people whose daily lives were shaped more by access to jobs and services than by abstract constitutional debates. These improvements mattered deeply and contributed to Mangope's heroic image. Mangope's defenders also argued that he maintained stability and order in a turbulent era. During the 1970s and 80s, South Africa was marked by violent repression, states of emergency, and economic uncertainty. In contrast, Batswana was often portrayed by its supporters orderly and well-run. Mangope's leadership style, although criticized as authoritarian, was interpreted by admirers as firmness necessary to prevent chaos and protect developmental gains. This perception was specifically strong among elder generations who associated stability, survival with progress. In this context, Mangope is remembered by some Batswana as a hero who delivered material improvement, cultural recognition, and a measure of autonomy when full freedom seemed unattainable. While on the other hand, critics emphasize the broader political cost of legitimizing apartheid. These competing interpretations explain why Mangope remains such a polarizing figure in South African history, condemned nationally by many, yet respected and even idolized within sections of the Batswana community who believe his leadership improved their lives under deeply unjust conditions. The Bophuthatswana Bantustan was officially declared independent on December 6, 1977, a status recognized only by the apartheid government and rejected internationally. Mangope became its president. Under his leadership, Bophuthatswana developed the outward symbols of a state, including a parliament, security forces, and public services, but it remained economically and military dependent of South Africa. Mangope ruled in an increasingly authoritarian manner, restricting opposition and suppressing dissent. And he justified his position by promoting Tswana nationalism and arguing that independence offered stability and development. Critics, however, regarded him as a collaborator whose authority rested on Pretoria's support rather than popular legitimacy. Lucas Mangope's military strategy for protecting Bophuthatswana was shaped by the realities of the homeland system. The territory had limited sovereignty, fragmented geography, and no capacity to defend itself independently against major external threats. As a result, his approach combined building an international security apparatus, maintaining tight alliances with the South African state, and using force selectively to deter internal challenges to his authority. Supporters argued that this strategy kept the homeland intact and functioned for nearly 2 decades in an extreme volatile political environment. At the center of the strategy was the creation and the strengthening of the Bophuthatswana Defense Force, BDF, established after the declaration of independence in 1977. The BDF was designed primarily for internal security rather than the conventional warfare. Its role was to protect government institutions, suppress coups, control unrest, and defend the presidency. Mangope invested heavily in the force relative to the homeland size, ensuring it was trained, equipped, and structured along the lines similar to South Africa's military. Officers were often trained with South African assistance, and the force worked closely with the Bophuthatswana police, creating a layered security system loyal to the presidency. Mangope's most important military safeguard, however, was his strategic alliance with the South African Defense Force, SADF. Bophuthatswana's survival depended on Pretoria, and Mangope ensured that this relationship remained strong. The SADF acted as a guarantor of his rule, stepping in when his government faced serious threats. This was most clearly demonstrated in the 1988 coup d'etat attempt. When dissident elements within the BDF tried to overthrow his government, Mangope was temporarily displaced, but South African forces intervened decisively, restoring him to power within hours. For supporters, this episode reinforced the idea that Mangope had successfully secured external military backing to protect Tswana self-rule against destabilization. Now, internally, Mangope emphasized control over weapons, intelligence, and movement. The BDF and police monitored political organizations, restricted the activities of liberation movements, and prevented armed groups from operating within the homeland. While critics view this as repression, supporters argued that it prevented Bophuthatswana from becoming a battleground like other parts of South Africa during the 1980s. By keeping armed resistance and large-scale violence out of his territory, Mangope was seen as shielding the interest of the Batswana people from the worst excesses of the apartheid-era security conflict. Mangope also used symbolic military authority to reinforce his statehood and loyalty. Military parades, uniforms, ranks, and ceremonies were highly visible and were meant to convey that Bophuthatswana was a serious organized state capable of defending itself. This symbolism mattered to many Batswana as it represented dignity and control. The military was presented not only as a fighting force, but as a guardian of Batswana sovereignty and national pride. In addition, Mangope relied on a centralized command structure that kept the military closely tied to the presidency. Senior officers were appointed based on loyalty, and the defense force was deliberately kept small enough to be manageable but strong enough to deter internal challenges. This reduced the likelihood of prolonged factional conflict within the armed forces for most of his rule. For nearly 17 years, the system succeeded in preventing coups, insurgencies, or territorial collapses, something that supporters highlight as evidence of effective military stewardship. From the perspective of his admirers, Mangope's military protection of Bophuthatswana ensured stability, continuity, and space for economic development. They argued that without firm security control and a SADF alliance, the homeland would have descended into chaos much earlier, undermining jobs, services, and social order. While his strategy ultimately failed in 1994 when political legitimacy collapsed, supporters maintained that for most of his rule, Mangope used military power not for expansion or aggression, but to preserve the homeland, protect the institutions, and maintain daily life for Batswana. Now, let us run a quick analysis of other Bantustans that coexisted with Bophuthatswana. For example, Lucas Mangope's leadership can be mostly clearly understood when compared with the other major homeland leaders of his era. Kaiser Matanzima of the Transkei, Lennox Sebe of the Ciskei, and Mangosuthu Buthelezi of KwaZulu-Natal. We are only going to be dealing with these four for now because these four operated under the same apartheid homeland framework but made very different political, economic, and strategic choices. In terms of political strategy and legitimacy, Mangope and Kaiser Matanzima were the most similar. Both accepted full independence for their homelands and became president of internationally unrecognized states. They justified this by arguing that independence offered Africans administrative control and development opportunities otherwise denied under apartheid. However, Matanzima's rule in the Transkei was marked by widespread corruption, cronyism, and instability, which undermined his legitimacy among supporters. Mangope, by contrast, cultivated an image of discipline, order, and institutional control. While both were authoritarian, Mangope was often seen by his followers as more administratively competent and less personally corrupt than Matanzima, which contributed to stronger loyalty among sections of the Batswana population. When compared to Lennox Sebe of the Ciskei, Mangope again appears more institution-focused and economically strategic. Sebe ruled through intense repression, creating a near-police state. His government lacked meaningful economic development. The Ciskei remained heavily impoverished, with limited infrastructure and employment opportunities. Sebe's reliance on fear rather than consent made his regime fragile, and it collapsed through a military coup in 1990. Mangope, although also authoritarian, invested more heavily in state institutions, economic projects, and civil administration as discussed before. For much of his rule, the Bophuthatswana Defense Force and civil services remained loyal, and the homeland functioned with relative stability. This distinction is key to why Mangope lasted longer in power and is remembered by supporters as a state builder, whereas Sebe is mostly widely remembered as a tyrant. Now, the contrast with Mangosuthu Buthelezi of KwaZulu-Natal is the most significant and revealing. Buthelezi rejected nominal independence, arguing that it would permanently fragment black South Africans and legitimize apartheid. Instead, he used the KwaZulu-Natal homeland as a political base while positioning himself as a national figure. This gave him greater legitimacy in the eyes of many black South Africans and allowed him to participate more directly in post-apartheid politics. Mangope took the opposite route. He embraced independence, prioritized ethnic self-rule, and resisted reintegration until the very end. Where Buthelezi sought national influence, Mangope focused on territorial sovereignty and Tswana nationalism. As a result, Buthelezi survived the transition politically while Mangope was removed from power. Economically, Mangope stands out more favorably than Matanzima and Sebe, but less so than Buthelezi. Bophuthatswana developed one of the strongest homeland economies driven by mining, manufacturing, especially tourism through Sun City. These ventures created jobs and revenue that translated into visible infrastructure and services. The Transkei and Ciskei, by contrast, remained largely dependent on migrant labor and South African subsidies, with minimal internal economic growth. KwaZulu-Natal, while not independent, benefited from its size, population, and integration into the Natal economy, which gave Buthelezi broader leverage. Supporters therefore argue that Mangope used independence more effectively than his peers to extract economic benefit, even within a fundamentally unjust system. In terms of security and use of force, Mangope, Sebe, and Matanzima all relied heavily on homeland militaries and South African backing. However, Mangope's security strategy was more systemic and sustained. Sebe's regime collapsed precisely because he lost military loyalty, while Matanzima increasingly relied on repression without institutional stability. Buthelezi differed again. He did not have a formal army, but relied on Inkatha-aligned structures and traditional authority, which later contributed to widespread political violence in the late apartheid period. Mangope's security model emphasized order and containment rather than mass mobilization. Historically and morally, all four leaders are controversial, but Mangope occupies a unique middle position. Matanzima and Sebe are broadly condemned for corruption and brutality, with little popular defense today. But Buthelezi remains deeply polarizing, but is recognized as a national political actor who influenced South Africa's transition. Mangope, meanwhile, is often condemned nationally as a collaborator, yet locally defended as a leader who delivered stability. His downfall accelerated by association with white far-right groups in 1994, sharply damaged by his legacy, but it does not erase the years in which many of his supporters felt materially better off under his rule. In summary, Mangope was more economically and administratively effective than Matanzima and Sebe, but far less politically adaptive than Buthelezi. His leadership reflects the deepest contradiction of the homeless system. He used apartheid structures to build a functioning state for his people, yet in doing so reinforced the very system that denied black South Africans collective freedom. This tension explains why he is remembered neither as a simple villain nor an unqualified hero, but as one of the most complex and contested leaders of the Bantustan era. As apartheid began collapsing in the 1990s, Mangope's government became increasingly isolated both locally and internationally. He refused to reintegrate with the rest of the South Africa to create the so-called Rainbow Nation dream. This stance triggered mass unrest in March 1994, including strikes by civil servants and a breakdown of discipline within the Bophuthatswana Defence Force and police. It was during this crisis that Mangope's name became linked to Eugene Terreblanche, leader of the far-right Afrikaner group, the AWB. Terreblanche and other right-wing Afrikaner militants opposed the end of apartheid and saw Bophuthatswana as potential ally against South Africa's democratic transition. AWB members entered the territory claiming they were there to support Mangope's resistance to reintegrate into the newly formed South Africa. The relationship between Mangope and Terreblanche was not a long-standing alliance but a short-term, opportunistic and convergence of interests. Mangope later denied formally inviting the AWB, while Terreblanche claimed that they have been called in to assist. The presence of the AWB proved disastrous. Their aggressive behavior and attacks on the civilians alienated local residents and further undermined loyalty within Bophuthatswana's own security forces. Instead of stabilizing Mangope's rule, the involvement of Terreblanche's followers accelerated the collapse. Within days, the Bophuthatswana Defence Force turned against the government, and the South African Transitional Executive Council intervened. Mangope was removed from power on 13 March 1994, and Bophuthatswana was placed under South African administrative head of the country's first democratic elections. After his removal, Mangope attempted to re-enter politics in post-apartheid South Africa, founding the United Christian Democratic Party, which achieved limited electoral success. This was an effort to use Christianity as a religious mask to captivate the hearts of the people and to gain favor within the masses. However, the masses recognized his anti-liberation stance and rejected this move. His legacy remains deeply contested. Supporters point to development projects undertaken during his rule, while critics argue that his rise and fall illustrate how the homeland system relied on authoritarian leaders propped out by the apartheid government, and how alliance with extremist figures like Eugene Terreblanche ultimately exposed the fragility and illegitimacy of the system. Lucas Mangope is widely criticized for betraying black South Africans because of his role that he played in legitimizing and enforcing the apartheid homeland Bantustan system, which was designed to strip black people of South African citizenship and political rights. The apartheid government's strategy was to divide black South Africans along ethnic lines and assign them to nominally independent territories, thereby excluding them from participating in South African political life. By accepting leadership within this system and later embracing the so-called independence of Batswana, Mangope helped give credibility to a structure that most black South Africans and liberation movements fundamentally rejected as a tool of racial oppression. Rather than aligning himself with the broader struggles for liberation led by organizations such as the ANC and the PAC, Mangope openly opposed them and cooperated closely with the apartheid government. His government depended heavily on Pretoria for funding, security, and political survival. And in return, he supported policies that enforced ethnic separation and discouraged unity among black South Africans. This collaboration meant that millions of Tswana-speaking people were classified as citizens of Botswana instead of South Africa, effectively denying them the right to live, work, and vote freely in their country of their birth. Many viewed this as a direct betrayal of collective black political aspirations. In the broader historical memory of South Africa, Mangope is therefore often seen not merely as a flawed leader, but as someone who actively enabled apartheid's divide and rule strategy. While some acknowledge that he believed in Tswana self-rule or persuaded development within severe constraints, many black South Africans regarded his actions as a betrayal because they delayed unity, legitimized racial segregation, and placed personal authority above collective struggle for freedom, dignity, and equal citizenship. So, with this said, I would like to know what you think of this man. Was this a hero who took the interest of his people to heart? Or was this a power-hungry, blinded enemy of change fooled by the apartheid system into believing he was given power? Please drop your comments down below and let us engage.